Here.
Alex Parascavas,
Here.
Kate Schwarzler.
Here.
All right, everybody have a chance to review the minutes from the April 5th, 2021 meeting. If there's any corrections to be made, we can take care of that now. No changes. A motion to approve.
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay. Motion. Oh,
Can
Did
I?
you need a second?
Yeah,
oh,
Kate, can I assume Kate was the second? Was that your, okay, thank you.
all right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Motion passes. Meetings or minutes are approved. Moving right along to visitors and public comments. I suppose we don't have any of those since everybody's out there. No staff reports, at least right now, unfinished business. Let's go ahead and move on to the new business. And we need to open a public hearing. And the public hearing before the Independence Planning Commission is now open for application file sub-2021-01, proposed subdivision, Gordon King applicant. Do any commissioners need to disclose any conflicts of interest, bias, ex parte contacts, or site visits? Everybody familiar where the property is?
Yeah, I'll just go ahead, just for transparency's sake, work with Gordon at Sedcor. He's been a good member of the Sedcor Construction Alliance, so we have, I've known Gordon for a couple years now. But there's no conflict or anything else. I just want to be fully transparent.
All right, thanks, Alex.
Yeah.
Okay, Oregon land use law requires several items to be read into the record at the beginning of each and every public hearing. So I'll let Fred take it away.
All right. All right. So just want to make sure, Gordon, are you there? I see his screen. I just don't see him.
Do you
All right.
need to see me?
Hey there, Gordon. No, I just wanted to make sure that you were there. So perfect. All right. We're having a public hearing tonight. The applicable substantive criteria upon which the case will be decided are found in the Independence Development Code subchapters 10, 11, 23, and 90. These criteria are addressed in the staff report and will be read and summarized by staff during the presentation of the staff report. All testimony, arguments, and evidence presented must be directed toward these criteria or other criteria in the Independence Comprehensive Plan or Independence Municipal Code, which the speaker believes to apply to the decision. ORS 197.7695A. The failure of anyone to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford this commission and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue will preclude appeal to the City Council and the Oregon Land Use Board of Appeals, LUBA, based on that issue. ORS 197.7635C. An issue which may be the basis for an appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals shall be raised not later than the close of the record at or following the final evidentiary hearing on the proposal before the city. Such issues shall be raised and accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the commission and the parties an adequate opportunity to respond to each issue. ORS 197.7631. The failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues related to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the city to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. ORS 197.798 or 796.3B.
All right, thank you, Fred. Can you give us the staff report now, please?
Yeah, you bet. So hey there, everybody. Fred Evander, community planner here, and I will introduce Steve Ward. Steve Ward is our city engineer. We don't typically see Steve at these things, but it's nice to have him here representing another component of the staff report. And Steve, I'll just sort of tap you to talk about utilities and facilities once I'm done. So basically, this application is for a 67 lot subdivision and likely 2 remainder parcels. So the thing is that it's a larger piece of property. It's about 70 acres, 70.18 acres. And it would divide the first northwest portion of it into 67 lots. It would also extend the right-of-way, a madrona, eastward, which would in effect create 2 remainder parcels. That's the scope of this this land use application tonight. I will try and share my screen, and then we can hopefully see some of this stuff. So let me share this. Let me pull this over. Can you guys see that? Can you guys see a whole bunch of the text at this point? Perfect. Now, sort of taking an overview of the entire lot, I should share this one first. You can see this is the entire 70.18 acres. And you can see that we're really focused on this northwest portion of the site, right? There's power lines that run north and south through the property. It's really north to the right here. I apologize for this. But Madrona Street here would be improved to a certain point, and then the rest of this would be dedicated to the city, in part because there would be utilities in that street. So as part of dedicating that, that would essentially create 2 remainder parcels. So that's how this thing works. Now, for the part that we're really looking at, the 67 lots, you'll see that there's a number of components that I'd like to sort of articulate, and perhaps I can zoom out just a little bit. The first that I'll note is there's improvements along Kalmage Road. You can see that right there. Kalmage Road will have a sidewalk on one side of it. Also, all of the lots along Kalmage Road will have an alley and will be served by an alley and have their fronts oriented to Kalmage Road. That's the concept there, and be alley served.
Well, how does that work? If their fronts are towards the road, but all entrances at the back, why can't they have their fronts at the back?
So that's a good question. Part of the reason is we typically don't like double fronted lots because it's like it's double the road improvements essentially. We didn't make them put a road back here, and ultimately part of the, and I get into it more in the staff report, and I'm sorry, I wasn't anticipating addressing the question right now. But part of the reason why we want the fronts oriented to Talmadge Road is we don't want to create streets anymore that have a row of fences and their backyards facing the street. Ultimately, we would like to ensure that our streets are nice community streets designed for a variety of modes, not just car, right? And so that's the intent there.
So they wouldn't be able to put fences there to block the sound or the kids from running into the street?
They could definitely put fences there, yeah.
I thought you said you didn't want fences on the street.
Just not like a 7-foot tall fence.
Because if the Talmadge Road is going to be busier and busier, I would think they'd want to block some of that noise, especially if you have to enter from the back of the house. You're not going to walk around the house in the rain to come in the front door, and your company can't park on Talmadge. They have to come into the alley, right?
Yeah, that would be correct. Yep. So
Brett, do you want to get through the rest of your staff
Yeah,
report and we can
yeah.
sort of
So,
discuss?
I mean, I think that's good. So,
Okay, I just wondered what that meant because it didn't seem logical.
right. And it's not all of the houses. I mean, indeed, this house right here could be oriented. So I don't know if you can see my cursor. I'll just call
Right,
this
I
out.
understand the
This
end
could-
ones wouldn't
The end
be, it's
ones
the
here.
middle
So,
ones.
but
It's
yeah,
the
it would
middle
be the middle
ones.
ones. Yep. So, so that's one component of this, this proposal. Also, I'll just call out that there's a fairly gridded street system throughout this proposal that would include the opportunity to connect it north and south to adjacent properties. That's completely consistent with our criteria. I know that several places within our code. Also, the streets right here at Madrona and this Road B, which is a continuation of Olympic Drive over here. Both of these would directly flow into Madrona and then Olympic Drive. So that is completely consistent with the intent of the Southwest Area Concept Plan. I note that in the staff report. Another component of it, I'll just call out, there's sidewalks throughout the entire project. You'll note that that's what these things are right here, sort of the gray along the streets. Those are sidewalks. There's going to be sidewalks throughout the entire project. Also, I'll call out that there is a proposed north-south trail that would go through the site on the east side of the wetlands. This is the power lines right here running through the site. Currently in our, I'll show it to you. Currently in our, let me get there. In our parks and open space plan, and I'll try and zoom in on this, you'll see that we call out the Central High School Connector Trail, which is a north-south trail. I apologize for the kind of pixelated appearance of that. But this follows those power lines. So this is in our parks and open space plan. This would be really the start of that trail coming north and south, and which will ultimately connect up to the to Central High School. That is this thing right here. That will continue south as the site develops further to the south. Also, you'll note that there are some access ways here. These access ways would offer the opportunity to come over to this wetland area, but it wouldn't necessarily continue a trail or anything through this wetland area. The wetlands on the site would be retained. You'll note in the staff, in the materials that I submitted you, attachment C, it says that the state's preference is for avoidance of wetland impacts. These folks have designed this site to avoid those wetland impacts. The stormwater for the property would be treated over here in a swale that runs west-east on the east side of the site. And I'll just call out this last thing, which I think is just a really nice component of this project. There would be sort of an enhanced sidewalk on the north side of Madrona Street, which would function as a shared use path on the north side of the street. That would ultimately replace bike lanes on the street and allow people to have a shared use path to ride their bikes on, or ride a skateboard on, or whatever, separated from traffic. We think that that is especially appropriate in this instance, given the location of the wetlands here and the ability to connect with this trail here and ultimately continuing south. So that's sort of the gist of this project, a quick sort of overview. Now I will note that there's just a couple of things that I'd like to call out in a little further detail. As you continue north along this sidewalk, the sidewalk will end right here. And we do see that it's important to continue this walking path to the north. So you'll note that one of our conditions as part of this application is that an improved crossing at Talmadge be provided right here at Madrona to allow people to walk up on this side of Talmadge. Also, the project will connect into Falcon Loop and offer people a route to walk north via Falcon Loop into toward Central Plaza. So that is a component of this project as well. I think that is basically where I'll leave it. You'll note that there's a number of conditions and analyses in the staff report. It is a long staff report. I don't really want to get full blown into the details of that. So I'll just sort of leave it there. If you have any questions of it, please feel free to ask. What I will note is that we did get 2 comments about the project. One was from Todd Whitaker at Polk County, the Polk County engineer, and he expressed concern. He said, it doesn't appear that they are considering southbound traffic out of the site. And you'll note that I tried to address that in the staff report. I've tried to sort of gather additional information. So let me try and get to that page right here. Now, I should say that the traffic impact analysis, we did our due diligence with this project. Mr. King submitted a traffic impact analysis that projected 100 units on this site. Instead of the 100 units at 67, so approximately a third of the trips are taken off of what this analysis represents. We took this report, we gave it to our traffic peer reviewer who see how it works as traffic impact analyses are funded by the applicant. And so the applicant works with their consultant to prepare these things. And then they submitted that and we took it and we gave it to somebody that we hired. And we said, would you review this for us and ensure that the findings are appropriate? They reviewed the findings and they said, yes, they're appropriate. We concur with the analysis. They noted a couple of things that errors in the calculations, but they were very minor. They also said, hey, it's not reflecting recent development on the south end of 7th Street. Steve Ward and I talked about that, and we felt like because there's not really a good transportation connection between 7th and this site right now, that additional level of analysis was not that valuable. So anyways, Mr. Whitaker said, it doesn't appear that the analysis is considering southbound traffic. And it doesn't appear that they're considering the effects on Stapleton Road at Oregon 99 or at Corvallis Road. Now, part of what Mr. Whitaker said was not correct because it does consider southbound traffic. It considers it distributes traffic, this analysis. It shows 15% of the traffic from this site going on Pacific Avenue, Oregon 99 south. It shows 5% coming south on Talmage Road, and it shows 10% going south on Corvallis Road.
And that's where it doesn't make sense, Fred, because why would you go north on Talmage, on Monmouth Avenue, and then south on Corvallis Road, when if you go south on Talmage and hit Stapleton and go east on it, you get to Corvallis Road. So why would you go through town if you could avoid the mess down there?
Why would you go this way? Now,
why would you go north out of here to Monmouth Avenue, and then east to Main, south on Main to get to Corvallis Road. Whereas if you go south on Talmadge, you hit Stapleton and you take Stapleton east and it puts you right out on Corvallis Road without having to go north or go through town. So
Right.
it seems like that 10% on Corvallis Road really ought to be 15 over here on Talmadge, because people are going to figure that out real quick, that they don't have to go through downtown.
Right. And so that's essentially what I did was, of these two intersections, the one that I'm more concerned about is Pacific
Yeah.
and Stapleton. And when we look at what it would actually calculate out as, you'll note that let's take the assumption that all traffic that turned left on Madrona and went this way, as well as the traffic on Talmadge.
I'm sorry, turned left on Madrona and
onto
go south on
Yeah.
Talmadge, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's imagine that it all went this way. Now, looking at this, you'll note that the left turn right here in the AM is 9 trips based on 100 households, and the left turn here is 3 trips. So if we combine those in the AM peak hour, that would be a total of 12 trips in the AM peak hour. If we took a third of those off, that's a total of 8 trips that's going to be leaving this project site and going south on Stapleton and 99 or about a trip every 7.5 minutes. So in the grand scheme of things, that is not all that much traffic. That would too assume that all trips left Madrona, which also I don't see happening, because right now, I would argue that Madrona is a much safer left to take onto 99.
Except that you have to go through residential area.
You have
and
to
it
go
slows
through.
you down, especially if it's school time and kids and buses are out, then it's going to be easier to go down. And I agree that the Stapleton 99 intersection is not really good, but I go that way rather than driving through all where the kids are.
Yeah, and I understand that. But again, it would be, so in AM peak time, it'd be about, taking the 67 houses, it'd be about 8 trips,
Right.
or 1 trip every 7.5 minutes. The PM peak hour sort of coming the other way back, it's sort of the same thing, where it's like 9.5 trips, 9.5 additional trips. So, or 1 every 6 minutes. I believe that's how I calculated it out.
Okay, I get that. It's just, you know, that it's faulty reasoning to think you'll go north and then go south.
Right, but I can see that, but again, when we combine the both of these together, ultimately it's still a relatively limited amount of traffic that we're talking
Until you get those multifamily units in there, which aren't considered in this, right?
Right, exactly. But any additional development on the project site is going to require additional analyses, especially given the fact, especially when they meet our requirements for a traffic impact analysis. So anything like multifamily, it's a certain threshold. I can't remember exactly what it is, but multifamily will likely trigger it. You bet. So that was one comment. The other comment that we have is almost something that Steve Ward would be better to share about. It was related to the wetlands and the drainage on the site. But before I hand it over to him, there's just one additional thing that I feel, 2 additional things that I'd like to address real quick. One is, they are required to offer either a fee in lieu for parks land or dedicate some of their property on the site for open space. It is a recommendation of staff that given the trail here, given the fact that they are envisioning having a park sort of in this general area, that having some dedicating the wetlands to the city is going to be in the city's long-term interest as part of that. So we would recommend that they dedicate I think it's 6.25% of the project site. They could either do that to this point, or they could dedicate it to this point as part of this phase and have some of it credited to future phases, or they could decide to do that just to this point. We don't recommend a specific consideration there. We just recommend that the 6.25% be dedicated at least as part of this phase, representing what's proposed here, if that makes sense. And then the other thing is, given the how the sale and everything and the future development of this lot may happen, it is likely that there might be interim partition that's proposed that divides this site off from the other two sites on the two remainder parcels. Staff is feels that that's a completely appropriate and consistent step in the overall development of this site, so long as the necessary conditions associated with this application are still met as part of that partition. It would be within the scope of this proposal, is the recommendation of staff. Now, for sort of an overview of utilities, Steve Ward is much more capable of talking about that. So let me hand it over to him. And Steve, would you please address the comment and the concern about drainage from the wetlands first?
Yes. Could you put on the map that had the different letters, the A through F, because I'll just refer to those.
Yep.
For everyone, it's just a lot easier. Okay. Regarding the storm drainage, at one point in time, the applicant submitted an application that took the storm drain north and discharged into the wetlands near Falcon Loop. Staff identified that as a potential problem. There's a lot of wetlands there, but there's no real defined drainage basin there. There's no defined drainage way there. So we then went back to the applicant and said, we can't support this discharge location of your storm drain. And within your current public works design standards, we have a section in there that talks about what we call approved point of disposal. So all this water eventually gets to the South Fork of Ash Creek. And so we then worked with the applicant to extend the storm drain where you see H all the way to 13th. And that'll be a detention and water quality facility. And then on the other side of 13th, there's a drainage ditch, a defined drainage ditch, which they can then discharge their stormwater into. So they'll be treating their water, they'll be detaining their water before it goes into the creek. Are there any questions about that component? Hearing none. Staff did a fire flow test in Falcon Loop. There's an existing fire hydrant just to the north. There is sufficient fire flow. We are recommending, just because we know this whole south area is going to have substantial growth and substantial improvements, and fire flows required for single family residential are limited, are only need to be 1,000 gallons a minute. But as we go into multifamily and and higher density use, then the fire code will require more fire flow. So we're recommending in our report a 12-inch line in F, a 12-inch line in G, and then a 12-inch line in Talmadge to the north, stopping at about where A is. And then all the other lines will be 8 inches. With the lines as proposed, they'll easily meet the fire flow requirements for this development. And eventually the 12-inch line in G will go to the east and connect into that system there, so that we've just got basically a 12-inch line will carry twice the capacity, has twice the capacity of a 8-inch line, let's say. Sanitary sewer is coming from the pump station at 13th Street. They have submitted plan and profiles for that sanitary sewer. We have reviewed those. We made some minor adjustments to that as part of the application. They made those adjustments, and we're satisfied that this is sufficient. We do know that the pump station in 13th can literally only just take this flow, and until a new pump station is constructed, the rest of the south area really is going to be limited in development, because this pump station pretty much takes the rest of the capacity of the system. And Westech did a couple of years ago just kind of a mini master plan of this area, and we located a new pump station near 13th and Madrona that will basically serve this entire basin for the south area. And so that pump station has to be built at some point in time for the rest of this development, but not for this first phase. That's pretty much utilities, unless you guys want me to talk about streets or anything like that. I mean, Madrona Avenue, we worked with them on that alignment. We've worked with them on extending streets to the adjacent properties. The pedestrian access ways to allow the public to get to the wetland areas. And I just want to give a little comment on the wetland areas. I mean, literally, this is farmland. This is not what a lot of us would consider wetlands. It would eventually go back, and you'd start to see some woody wetland plants and stuff like that. But I mean, you could literally put a soccer field out there and it's still a wetland. You just can't excavate, you can't fill without a wetland permit, but you could fine grade it and put a soccer field out there, and that is permissible by law. So it's not what I call a pristine wetland. It's basically a farm field wetland. So with that, I take any questions any of you may have.
Thank you.
I had a couple questions. So you're talking about Madrona. I'm not clear from the maps. Are they finishing Madrona out to 13th, or is it stopping there by the towers?
It's stopping at the at the
Power
BP.
lines?
Yes. Now
Okay.
it will be extended. It will be extended, but this development sends all the traffic out to Talmadge.
Okay.
Now,
But the pipes will still go in?
there will be a pipe in 13th, and there will be an all-weather access, so we can maintain a pipe in Madrona. There will be an all-weather access so that we can maintain the pipe during the wintertime.
Okay. My other question was, you said something about they're thinking about putting a park on the north end of that wetlands, just below of Falcon. Are they?
I'm just saying that these are not pristine wetlands, and you.
No, in the area that isn't designated as a wetland. Just
Yeah.
to the west of where the word park is.
We have not discussed any park improvements at any high level, at any degree at all.
Okay, because it would be a good place to put a park. And down there by G, between G and H, you could have a nice little pocket park, the things that make it so nice in the Edwards edition. Those would be some of the things that I would like to see for livability.
I think when the city does a parks master plan, that's exactly what we were thinking. If there was a play area or a tot area, it would be in the non-wetland area, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And you'll notice where it says F in the gold line, that is outside the wetlands, because we've required them, since there's going to be a water line there, we're requiring a 12-foot wide concrete walkway that allows Public Works to drive on that walkway, allows the public to use it as a bike pedestrian path, but that way we can maintain the water line year round.
Right, which is all good. I'm just thinking of a place to, like you were saying, kick a ball, throw a ball, run around, climb on a jungle gym, something like that, which under the power lines isn't really that good always.
Yeah, there is room for that in the non-wetland areas, but I also want to say that I think even the wetland areas, you could plant that and have a playable field during the summertime, not in the wintertime, but during the summertime, yes.
But yeah, but school time is when a lot of the game, fall and spring, you would need some place for a soccer field that wouldn't be wet.
Yeah, that won't work here. I can guarantee.
Right. I had a question about the drainage flow where you have H.
Uh-huh.
Just to make sure I understood, you're saying that will be enough to contain all the runoff that would come from this development? What about the other developments that would come later? Would it be the same drainage place?
They haven't proposed anything yet, but the other developments, let me say this. This H would be publicly maintained, so City Public Works is maintaining it. We've seen earlier proposals where they had detention water quality spotted around, and we basically insisted and said, we're not going to maintain 4 or 5 different wetland areas. And so it's our thought that if H needed to be expanded for future development, it could be expanded. And the nice part about it is it's right next to Madrona Avenue, and we've made it very clear we are not going to have multiple areas that we have to maintain. And so they haven't got deep enough into the design on the easterly portions of this property to figure that out. But they could make H big enough for everything to the north between F and 13th, and make it big enough today, and then they're done.
Okay.
That's a choice they'll make. They'd spend more money doing that. We can't require that. But we can require when they come and develop that property to the north of Madrona and to the east of F, that it be combined with H.
Okay. Thank you.
So I will just note too that we did send out notice for this. We published it in the newspaper. We did all of the applicable notice that was necessary for this proposal. Like I said, only got a couple of comments. Are there any other questions at all for staff about the proposal?
I've got one, Fred. You have the future high density development and the future single family. Which would be the next phase after the current 67?
I don't think that we know. Just this is what Corby is talking about here. Future high density. This is Madrona here. Future high density to the north. Future single family. I don't believe that we know at this point. Also, this future medium density is not a part of this proposal right now. So I don't think that we know exactly what will be next.
I had a question about the lights. I don't know enough about Independence's code, but it says that the street lights will be to the city code. Does that mean they're shielded so that the light just goes down?
That is a very good question. And I'll tell you a couple things. This is just my personal bias. I think we're putting in way too many streetlights these days. So I like fewer streetlights, not more. And so I'm very cognizant of how the streetlights lay out. And so PP&L has specific streetlights that they use. And so we are stuck with their streetlights. They are shielded, but they're typically Cobra headed lights, the Cobra head lights. They're not like the shoebox lights you'll see in a parking lot or something like that. But I will tell you, I tend to stretch things out. I want them at intersections. But like if you look at Madrona and then say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, there'd be one at each intersection on that north-south street that goes through Madrona, and then maybe one more mid-block. But I'm kind of death on putting too many streetlights in. First of all, you guys are getting charged $5 a month for every streetlight, and I just don't want you getting charged a bunch for lights that you don't need. And second of all, I just think we have way too many lights these days.
Yeah, I've seen different examples where they're very well shielded and the light just goes down. It isn't quite so polluting and doesn't make the night so bright.
Yeah, we're pretty stuck with the PGE lights.
No. Okay.
Any more questions, commissioners, for the staff, for Fred or Steve?
I had a couple more, of course. I guess, well, I wanted to know when 13th will be finished out, or is that just waiting for the next phase? And I wanted to know if the city has any plans for connecting the bike path and walking path on the east side of Talmadge northward, because in the report it says that it will stop and the city's responsible for connecting it further. And I wondered if there was any plan for doing that, because it would, you can't just dump people out. Are you just going to dump them to the west side and then they'll have to cross back over to get to the high school and the middle school? It would be nice to know when that's going to be connected northward. Then I had a question later on one of the maps, that shows the land use for the southwest portion. It still shows Maple Street going through, and Fred, you'd said Maple Street is not going to go through. I just had a question on that.
Right. So I'll address both of them. So when do we anticipate Talmadge going north? We do anticipate that the lot north of this site will develop at a certain point. That is zoned high density residential, and some of those street improvements will continue to the north as that develops.
So it won't be the city doing it. You're waiting for development.
We're waiting for development
So
to do that.
It just stops.
It will stop, but you'll note that one of the conditions, I believe, in the staff report is that the developer work with the city engineer to find a good way to transition that bike lane into the rest of traffic, so it doesn't just dump people out. So that is one of the conditions proposed within the staff report. Now the question about Maple is a great question. The reason that indeed, Maple is not going to go through. We're not going to construct 3 different bridges over the South Fork of Ash Creek. The reason that that's still shown like that is because the plan, which was created in 2012, hasn't changed at all. So
Okay.
It's the same plan.
Just wanted to make sure, since you had said that and then it showed up again.
It's just the same image from the same plan.
So who do we talk to about getting more park area or making sure that parks are included in part of this development as this area develops? Because I'm not seeing anything specific, and I worry that we lose the opportunity to make it a good neighborhood that has places for kids to be, and rather than spray painting the greenhouse or something in Inspiration Garden, they have a place where they can play on something or run around. Because Inspiration Garden is not a park to play in for kids.
Right. So let me show you this just one more time. So where we are anticipating the parks within this neighborhood include things like the power line trail, which will go north and south through the neighborhood.
How wide is that?
What's that?
How wide is that?
It's 100. This is 100 feet wide.
Okay.
So this will run north and south, but then also to this wetlands area, and then ultimately connecting up into the high school. I mean, it wasn't our idea to come up with this Central High School connector trail, but I'll tell you, I think it's a really good idea. The trail that's in, the trail that's in our Parks and Open Space plan, part of the reason it's such a good idea is literally you can stand right here in Falcon Loop and you can look down the power lines and you can see the high school. Like, I mean, it's like literally like 2 blocks away or something at that point. It's just not that far. Also, just north of Falcon Loop is Ross. So as we're thinking about this neighborhood, I really encourage you to think about how this neighborhood will connect into the rest of the community.
It's
And
the old Roths, right? You're
the old
talking
Ross,
about?
indeed. Yeah, excuse me, Central Plaza, I should call it. So let's think about this development and how it's connecting in a non-motorized way into some of our existing commercial areas.
I understand that, but my question is about park areas for kids to play in. I
Right,
understand this is a nice way to have a big path, but
right,
you know, if you go to Edwards Edition, they have all these little pocket parks and they have play equipment, or they have a table to sit at, or they have shelters to sit under. And it makes it very conducive to neighborhoods and gives it a good feel. And people who live there like that. And I'm just wondering, how do we incorporate some of that into what Independence does?
it's a good question. Our standard is you either pay a fee in lieu of 13% of the market value of the land, or you donate 6.25% of the land. It's the recommendation of staff that that we, as this site is developing, and the applicant is fine with this, that that wetlands and that area shown as park is either gradually or all at one time dedicated to the city for parks and open space.
But the wetlands isn't something they could have built on, so it's really not them giving up anything. I mean, because of laws, you can't build on that, so they weren't going to be able to put houses there anyway. I'm wondering if we can't, how do we make sure that we incorporate some of those nice little pocket parks and even a big area in this whole southwest area that has a nice park like Madrona Park, the big park where there's, you can have a soccer field in the winter or the fall, and where you can walk around a track.
Fred, can I interrupt for a second?
Yep.
So maybe I can talk a little bit about our thinking when we were doing this. And Fred came up with the code that says we had to have a certain percentage of this in park. And so it seemed like it would be really easy to just cut off a little bit of that wetlands and dedicate it to the 67 lots. We're putting in for a partition, for an actual land use minor partition. And in that minor partition, your staff said, why don't we go ahead and take, or make you give us, as the case may be, the whole area around that wetland, including the areas we could have put houses in. We think that we actually thought that was a great idea, because we're going to use part of that area. And Fred, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're about, we needed about 3 acres for the 67 lots. And I think we're going to end up dedicating 4.8 acres. I think we need about what, 1.3 or something. We're going to bring in 4.8, 7.1, excuse me. We're going to bring in 7 acres. And part of this was our vision, and I know the staff has heard me say this more than once, but our vision is, and part of the inspiration was the Madrona Park. I don't know what you guys call that. When I go out towards 99, there's a wonderful park on the left with a large soccer field that's indented that that you can play in year round. We sort of think this area, the 7+ acres in here, was sort of that same, had that same sensibility where if the park was properly designed, there's the upland areas in white, plus there's the, as Steve said, there's a really, really low quality wetlands. And what that meant for me as a developer is there's another wetlands we've talked about a lot in Salem, for instance. It's actually has a lot of blackbirds and willows and osprey and nutria growing in it, because it has water quite a bit of the year. This one won't. And the thought really was sort of duplicating at least conceptually sort of duplicating what was on Madrona. That's really, you needed a large area of land to do that. Even though we couldn't have built on this, we certainly could have mitigated part of it. We could have moved Madrona. And I think Fred and Public Works and Engineering has seen our original design actually did cut Madrona through part of this wetlands because we're allowed a certain percentage of, taking over some of the wetlands when we were using access ways. But really, we thought this really is an opportunity one time to get as much dedicated to a sort of a centralized park area or a master park that I think is going to have a lot of potential. One of the things we've talked to the city about is we're not going to be able to anticipate everything that the City of Independence wants in their park plan, but we can certainly anticipate that it's going to take a large area of land to do that. There's going to be areas so the houses aren't going to go up like next month. We're not going to have families out there in the next 3 months. It's going to take a long time to get our utilities in, infrastructure, the partitioning done. We still have a lot of work to do out there. I'm hoping that the City of Independence will be having those discussions about what they envision that park to be at the same time we're trying to get the 67 lots. I don't know if that helps at all, but our thought was the more land we can give up, and it's not a lot of land that we can use, but we are trying to dedicate some of the land we could use so that there could be fairly soon some swing sets or those type of things that you might see typically in a park. And so you'll see there on the north side where that little thing says park, there's a whole area in there that we're not going to be disturbing any wetlands. Even if we didn't do anything with a wetland area, there's an area there that could have, I think I like the term pocket park. There's an area there next there. There's also an area there on the north side of Madrona at that curve that could be a nice little gather area as well. And you still wouldn't be disturbing wetlands. We're not going to be excavating it. We're not going to be backfilling it. We're not going to do any of that stuff that's against the law. But you can probably use parts of that as they've done it in other park areas. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but we actually were thinking that ultimately, if you're developing this whole 70 acres, you need a large park area.
Thank you. I appreciate that you understand that. And so my question to Fred is, how do we get the city to pick up on that and decide that they're going to dedicate some time and funds? Because the park south of Maple Street and north of Chestnut still has nothing in it. And I guess it was supposed to be a park when they started developing on 7th Street 15 years ago. So I just kind of want to know, who do we need to talk to make sure that this gets on the list for development as a park?
Right. So I mean, that's definitely a Sean Irvine question. The criteria that we have to go on, and remember, we're judging an application based on the criteria that we have in front of us right now. The criteria that we have, and this is what let me get back to my staff report. The criteria that we have right now, I'll scroll down to it. I think it's right at the end. Oh, shoot. I thought it was right at the end. Yeah. Land for public purposes. The applicant shall dedicate to the city attractive land within or adjacent to the proposed subdivision, not less than 6.25% of the gross area of said subdivision for public park and recreation purposes. Any tract of land dedicated shall be approved by the city as being suitable and adaptable for park and recreation uses. At the option of the Planning Commission, the city may permit the applicant to pay a sum of money in lieu of dedication of the land. Said sum shall be equal to 13% of the market value of the undivided land as of the date of the final plat approval. Based on that, it doesn't say anything about things like swing sets. It doesn't say anything about a plan for parks. It talks solely in terms of values and amounts. And so
I
that,
understand that, and I understand what you're saying, and they're doing that. But my question is, if this is the planning commission, how do we plan for these things in the future? Because that's part of what I thought this commission was looking at, was how to make it livable and how to make it a good neighborhood.
right, I
And
think that's
part
great.
of it.
That question is for the Parks and Open Space
Okay,
Commission is the ones who plan for parks.
so then we need to loop them in on this and talk to them about it.
You bet.
And Fred,
Exactly.
if I can add into that, so I think a lot of it just comes down to funding. There are a lot of parks and there are a lot of planned parks that have been identified on the Parks Master Plan that have yet to be developed, strictly because it's a budget issue. And I know that Sean at the city has been diligent about applying for grants when possible, not just for like the Riverfront Park, but also the neighborhood parks, to try to get that funding. Parks are surprisingly expensive to put in. You wouldn't necessarily always think so at the outset, but I agree that that south area of town has been identified as sort of lacking in some of the parks amenities, whether it's active recreation use like the pocket parks, the swing sets, and also just the passive, the trails and the trail connections. So I think that this plan definitely goes towards addressing some of that with the trail connections, which would be super helpful. And even I was thinking of, the park down by the boat landing that has like the bark path around it and offers a little bit more of the passive recreation. And it also, frankly, is kind of built so that it could be flooded if it needs to be flooded, or that it can withstand some of that. So I think there are some good examples around town of what could be developed on that site, even though it is technically a wetland, and still have it be a great amenity for that neighborhood. And I agree, with Becky's frustration of just the time scale. So I think, taking it not only to the Parks Commission or the Parks Committee, but they're going to have the same, they're following the master plan. It really comes down to a budget constraint and how to find the funding to dedicate towards building those parks out.
Okay, any more questions for either Fred or for Steve? If not,
I
no
do
more questions?
one.
Lori?
Yeah. Fred, on page 26 of the staff report, there's like a potential conditional unit about trees.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
don't know, like that might be too in the weeds for this conversation, but I'm new to this. This is my first subdivision plan I've looked at, so I'm curious about what that means or what the action of the planning commission is around that.
Yeah, thank you very much, because it's not something that I actually forgot to put it up in the rest of the conditions. And I mean, it's something to consider. I mean, as the subdivision is proposed right now, Madrona Street and Talmadge will have unbroken street frontages. So it won't, both of them will not have like driveways coming in a whole bunch of places. Based on that, it seems like it would be a unique opportunity to take both of those streets and create sort of a street tree planning scheme along the streets, where all the trees are a consistent planning style to actually create sort of a unique neighborhood look and feel. Now, if that's something that the planning commission wanted to consider here as a condition, I would recommend that you consider that, just especially based on the fact that both of those streets are gonna, like I say, not have driveway cuts everywhere. How we typically do it is we typically have builders select what trees they want to install at the time that they're building. They typically install one street tree, and it can be from an approved list, right? That gives people lots of flexibility, but at the same time, in a place like this, we could actually have the opportunity to create a really distinct sort of look and feel coming into this neighborhood. And it's just something that I identified as a potential condition. So consider if that's a good idea or not.
I think that would be a nice and a good thing to do to help it seem, clean the air and make it seem more like a neighborhood.
All right, any other questions?
So
If
will
not-
that become one of your conditions then, Fred?
If you folks want to have that as one of the conditions, when you make a decision on it, if it's a decision to approve, then just add that potential condition at the end or note it in your motion.
Fred, I have a question for you. Are you, you are aware that we're putting in for the minor petition application at the same time concurrently?
Yep, exactly. Yep. So, and I identified that if that I consider that essentially part of this, and if the land use proposal is approved by the planning commission, that's a completely appropriate, consistent step with their decision. So, yep, you bet.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Okay, if no questions,
Fred,
go ahead, Steve.
I have a council meeting, Zoom meeting I have to get to, so can I step off?
Yeah, does anybody have any other questions for Steve?
I don't think so.
Okay, I'm going to head to my next Zoom meeting. Thank you much, everybody.
Hey,
Thank
Steve,
you.
nice having you. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
All right. I think we can go ahead and move on to applicant and others in favor may speak. Before hearing testimony, all who wish to speak, please fill out a speaker card. Obviously, we can't have Mr. King fill out a speaker card. But if you have anything to say to us, go ahead and say it now. For Gordon.
I guess I have to turn the speaker on, the microphone on. I do, the only thing I would really say is that this application and design has been being considered for, I would say, about 4 or 5 months now. And your city has been really proactive in making sure that the developer is following all of the components of your statutes and design guidelines that they'll best benefit the city. I just to give you some examples real quick, we originally, I think our original plan just had one street coming through here at Madrona, and now we have 3 entrances from Talmadge. One of the things I don't think you brought up here, Fred, and it might be in the conditions here, I'm sure it is the pathway with the blinking light. I think we were all talking about speed concerns along the Kalmage Road. And I know when my son and I was out there putting up a sign, we just about got run over out there. And so those are things that we were a little bit concerned, and the city's worked with us extremely well and trying to come up with some safety measures and that type of thing. Somebody mentioned no parking on the front of Talmadge Road, and we concurred with that just based on the traffic out there at this point. The multi-use plan was something we hadn't thought of before. It came up, I think Fred brought it up, and we think that's a great idea for the size of this subdivision, possibly. And then I think the last thing I would say is we did do a study for 100 homes here initially and came up with 67 homes because of working around the conditions of the property and traffic and and the sanitary sewer issues. We don't know when, it's really hard for us to anticipate when we're going to be able to do any additional development on this property. So what we've really tried to do is bring our best foot forward on putting the best plan together on this first phase that we can put. We talked about the parklands, and so, you know, we didn't want to cut off a little piece that we could get by with. We really wanted to anticipate future needs for a park and something that you know, this whole area in this community could be proud of. So, and I think that's all I've got. I think I've talked to Fred enough. In a nice way, Fred.
I still wondered about those houses that have to face Talmadge but don't have any entrance.
Let's talk about that a little bit, because there's been developers that have done that. And I would tell you, Becky, that I probably asked that question. If I asked it once, it'd probably be 50 times how that's going to work. We drew this, Fred, I don't exaggerate. I bet we've drawn this 50 different ways trying to make this work. But the city has a clear objective. And so our plan as a developer, and really our mission as a developer, was not to make the city fit with our objectives for our streetscapes, but really try to develop this so it fit with the city's goals. And if you drive up and down Talmadge, one of the things that somebody mentioned Madrona and a residential area. I think one of the ideas, first of all, from a safety point of view, I think it'd be horrible to have driveways coming in off of Talmadge. We also were told because Madrona is going to eventually be a connector between Talmadge and 13th. So we might as well develop that now and not wait 10 years from now when we can do the rest of the development. We're actually going to design that and dedicate that amount of space that would be required for that connector. Again, the multi-use plan, but back to the fronts. I know you can't see this, but one of the things I sort of argued for, which is sort of ironic from a developer's point of view, but we actually argued, and you'll see a dotted line on the alleys, because we thought that a 20-foot alley, although it's adequate for driving up and down, it wasn't adequate for the person that's going to park on the side, or when garbage cans have to go out and the garbage truck is trying to come up and down that street. And now I'm hitting garbage cans because it's so narrow. So we basically are going to tell the builder, you have to be, that we're dedicating an additional 5 feet that they can't put a fence on or build on those alleys on each side, so that we have enough width. And that wasn't really a requirement from the city. It was just a practical requirement. So a little common sense says, we're going to require on each one of those houses that you can put 2 cars off the alley. You're going to put 2 cars in a garage, 2 cars at least off the alley. And then we added an additional 5 feet on each side of the alley, so that you can't put a fence, you can't close it out, and it's not going to look like a tunnel in there. So we sort of, and you guys agreed with that, right, Fred? I mean, we just decided at the end that made a lot more sense to add that extra 10 feet in that alleyway. Whether you say no parking or not, somebody, you know how that works. Somebody's going to end up parking there. So we also have parking on the south side of Madrona, and that makes sense for us, even though it's not going to get you all the way up to Road A without walking. It kind of made sense to us because of the multi-use path. The multi-use path, you know, I don't know how many of you have driven down a busy road with a bike lane that's about, it seems like about, I mean, I was in Corvallis the other day and I thought, I can't believe people don't get hit by mirrors, because the road is fairly narrow, and then you have this, it looks like a 2-foot bike lane, and you got 4 feet of bike, and it's really tight. So that's from a safety point of view and connectivity point of view, that if you guys are allowing that multi-use plan, that's just a great feature. But I think on Kalmage Road, Becky, I think when you drive up and down and you see front of houses instead of backs of houses, I think long-term, whether I was on board with that at the beginning or not, I think long-term I can see that as a nice feature for a community. Also on Madrona, if you notice, for the same theme, we don't have any driveways coming off of Madrona. Same idea, that you'll see landscaping instead of cars and driveways. That was That was the design. That was the purpose of this design. Can you guys still hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Am I the only one excited? Or is it just late?
I just, if I was building a house there, I might want it to face the way that people are coming into my house, but oh well.
I just sold a house on Goldfish Farm Road in Albany. As a little personal aside, one, I can't believe people bid on houses now, and that's crazy, but it's an alley load, and it's right there by the Walmart. If you get a chance to see these type of small subdivisions, it's by the new Walmart there on the east side. All of the houses there are what we call alley loads. They seem to work great, and so when you drive down Goldfish Farm Road, past Coastal Farm, on the right and left, you're going to see fronts of houses. They're going to be porches. They're going to be cute. They all have landscaping, well manicured lawns and shrubs. And luckily I had a good tenant there because I didn't do it. But the alleys are where you drive and park your car and put your garbage out. And it seems to work. So, you know, it's what you get used to, I think, actually.
All right, any more questions for Mr. King? All right, is there anybody out in the audience, Karen, that wants to speak in support of this application? Okay, moving right along, how about anybody wishing to speak against the approval? Nobody's out there? Okay, well, I don't think, are there any other questions that we need to ask anybody? Okay, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing then. So now it's just time for us to deliberate and do a vote.
I was just going to say, the alley load thing to me is sort of, that's part of the appeal of Edwards, right? It's like where you have all the back facing, so we're talking about pocket parks and everything else that Edwards has. Well, Edwards also has an alley load, and I think it actually works for the neighborhood really well. So I don't have a lot of heartburn about it. And I actually, honestly, this is a really thorough, beyond thorough staff report to read through. I don't have a lot of sort of heartburn about much of it. It's nice to see something not down 7th Street for development, to be honest. And so it's, nice to not have to consider this big transportation kind of morass. I don't know what you want to call it. Like, just it's always a challenge. So this seems surprisingly straightforward given a 167-page packet for us. So which I think my heart dropped slightly when I got this in the mail. So.
I thought I got 2 packets at one time.
Yeah, you did. But yeah, no, actually I like the idea of the condition for the tree schema, Fred, and I appreciate that you threw that in. And I really like the multi-use path idea. I think that's a really great tidbit. And also, I just want to say, we've been talking a lot for the last 6 months. Sorry, I'm talking a bunch, but we've been talking a lot for the last 6 months about proximity to commercial and proximity to parks. And I know, I think it's sort of, this fits with what we're talking about, right? It create walkable sort of areas where you can get to Central Plaza, you can get around, proximity to the high school. There's dedicated paths that are off of Talmadge, right? That you sort of backdoor things. I think that's exactly what we've been talking about for creating little neighborhoods. And I think this plan and this proposal speaks to a lot of that. So, I mean, it's kind of where I'm at.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, we know what comes next. Who's the brave one? Anybody?
Yeah. Karen, do you have some language that you could feed us? And then I do want to add in the condition for the street tree planting plan.
Okay, yeah, so I would suggest a motion to recommend approval of SUB 2021-01, adopting findings, conditions, and recommendations contained in the staff report, and adding the condition, Commissioner Preskevich, and that would be it.
Okay, all right. Well, if nobody else will do it, I will recommend that we adopt or approve SUB 2021-01 Southwest Crossing with all of the, read me the three little letter words again.
Findings, conditions,
Findings.
and recommendations.
Finding conditions and recommendations identified in the staff report, and then adding the certain condition 19A, the potential condition that was also included.
Everybody, sounds good to everybody?
I'll second that.
Okay. All those in favor?
I
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. All right. Thank you, Mr. King.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's good to see you all again.
Thanks, Gordon, and say hey to Chuck if he's sitting there.
Okay.
Oh, you're on mute. Take care.
Any other discussion items? I have one. Can you tell us what's going in the old Ross, Fred?
I cannot. I don't actually know. I've heard various rumors, but I don't think any of them are true. I know that I've talked to sign people, but then I don't think that anybody's pulled the trigger on it. And then I've talked to the owner, and he hasn't told me. So
Because Rich Duncan has a sign up in the front, and I know him from my days in Salem. But and then the second one, what's in front of Tractor Supply? They were digging the footings today.
I have no idea. That's outside of Independence.
Are you sure it's not inside of Independence? It's right across from the firehouse.
Yeah, that's
No,
just
it's not.
out.
Oh, okay.
Fred, I wanted to commend you for this staff report, honestly,
Yeah,
and all the conditions and all of the work that I'm sure you've been working on, because this was a big one. I also wanted a point of clarification. Sorry, I don't mean to belabor this, but for when we're talking about pocket parks and things in Edwards, I think a lot of those are private parks that are part of the HOA in Edwards. So they're not, I don't think they're run by the city. So I think there's just a point of like, there's a little bit of twist to that. I don't want to bring it up during a hearing and whatnot, but I think it's not as quite cut and dry as just parks. So
Well, is this something that we've had work parties with the historical commission? What about a planning commission, parks commission? So we all can kind of get on the same footing
Yeah, that's a good idea.
and see, I mean, all these things, if we're approving development, and I mean, like Becky says, that park there up between Maple and Chestnut, I mean, I understand that when that first went in, the developer promised the park with all the amenities, and it went, we are on the third owner there, I think now, fourth maybe. And yeah, it's got grass and dog poop bag station, which is great. But I think the people that bought their homes there definitely wanted some kind of substantial play structures and whatnot put in there. But if that's something that we could utilize, that would, put them in contact with us and us in contact with them. So we're thinking more about, and maybe the Parks Commission could get with the developer and lay out a good plan for all of these upcoming developments. So maybe we can keep that in mind, possibly.
Sounds good. Yeah, that sounds really good. Yeah, so just a couple of things coming up. So you remember that I think we had scheduled on May 11th that we were going to have a joint planning commission, city council meeting on the transportation system plan. That meeting, it sounds like, might get canceled. We don't know that for certain, but if that's the case, we'll just push it back to the May 25th meeting. Is that right, Karen? Yeah, so keep your eye out for emails about that? It's not the 25th?
The 25th, well, it may not matter to you guys, but there's a memorial planned in Monmouth for the death of Mr. Floyd
Oh,
that evening.
okay.
That's a regular council meeting night, so.
So that's that. Just keep your eyes out for that. If that does get pushed back, potentially, we will push back we're planning on the public hearing on the TSP in June. If that gets pushed back to late May, that will probably get either rescheduled for mid-June or pushed back to July. So if that's, I guess we'll sort of play it by ear from there. We just learned about this today, so we're still finding out stuff. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it from our end. We have been super busy at the city, it seems like. But other than that, things are going good.
You got a big raise then, right, Fred?
I don't think so.
Oh, well, public servant, that's what happens.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
All right, any more questions for anybody, discussion? If not, we can do a motion to adjourn. This one's not so hard.
I move we adjourn.
Second, anybody?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Bye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passes, we're adjourned. Thank you.